Hello, little smuts, and welcome back to Smut Chat with Jeen. This time it's just little old me, no exciting guests. Sorry, we will be back to our normal format next month. But April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and that is what today's topic on Smut Chat is going to be about. So, before I dive in, I want to start with some content warnings and some affirmations for you. First and foremost, your safety and security is the most important thing today. So, if this is not the content for you, please feel free to close the window, scroll on by, go treat yourself to something tasty, go take some deep breaths, go take a nap, whatever it is that you need to do. You absolutely do not need to engage with this content today if it is not for you. Second thing, if, as you're watching this video, you start to notice certain things happening to you, your palms get sweaty, maybe your heart starts racing, or you just generally start to feel a little bit more anxious, that is a sign that you should close the video and scroll on through the day. Maybe consider putting both feet on the ground and taking a couple of deep, calming breaths so that you can regulate your nervous system again. Again, you do not have to engage with this content today if it is not for you. Your safety and security is the most important thing, so please do prioritize yourself. I'm going to give you an outline as to what this particular video is going to be about today so that you can fully prepare for what the content is going to be. So we're going to start with some basic statistics about SA. We're also going to talk about signs of trauma when it comes to this type of violence. And then we're going to spend the majority of the time talking about how somebody can support someone who's experienced sexual assault. Finally, before I jump in, I just want to remind everyone to be intentional about the types of comments that they might leave on this video. Self-disclosure is entirely your call, but do remember to avoid trauma dumping and to be careful about the types of information and details that you might share. We never know what's going to trigger somebody else who might read your comment. And remember that consent is always key. If somebody hasn't consented to hearing your story, this is something that we have to be mindful of as a way to protect ourselves and the people around us and our community. Also, if you feel so compelled and you want to share coping mechanisms or things that have helped you on your healing journey, you are absolutely welcome to share those. But if you also don't want to add your voice to this conversation today, you don't have to do that. You are perfectly welcome to consume this content privately. Now, as a former social worker, this issue is actually really important to me. I worked for over 10 years in the gender-based violence awareness, prevention, and response world. So I'm really plugged into this issue from a social, political, emotional, and systemic standpoint. So I'm going to start with some statistics. Roughly 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men and about half the disabled community have reported experiencing some form of unwanted sexual contact in their lifetime. We unfortunately don't have great data on the LGBTQ community or the trans and non-binary communities, which is a travesty, and unfortunately it kind of feels like we might not get that data for a while. It's also really important to note that all the data that I just shared with you is probably underreported for a multitude of reasons, but in general, those are the globally accepted statistics when it comes to SA. Now, I'm not a huge fan of narrowing down people into numbers like that because people are people and we are not numbers. However, I do share these statistics to make one really key important point, which is this. You 100% do know somebody who has experienced sexual assault. You might not know who they are, you may never know who they are, but those numbers speak for themselves. There's absolutely no way that you don't know somebody who's experienced something like this. I think it's really important to remember that trauma like this manifests in different ways in different people. There is no one way to manifest. So some people might show up with very big feelings, very tearful. They might have extreme swings in emotion from anger to denial to sadness to depression to fear. Others are going to crack jokes and make fun of themselves or make fun of the situation as a way to bring some levity to the situation. They might even spend a lot of time trying to make those around them feel more comfortable with it. Some folks develop a very big aversion to physical touch, which makes a lot of sense. Others actually crave more consensual touch because it's a way to get back in touch with their bodies and to reclaim their sense of self and control. It's not uncommon to see changes in sleeping, eating, and working patterns, but it's also not uncommon to see no changes in those areas. You might hear people playing the what if game or trying to blame themselves, and you might also come across someone who's like, this was not my fault, and this was a really messed up thing that happened to me. So I share all of these examples to say there really isn't one way to present when it comes to someone who's experienced this type of hurt. Some people might go through different manifestations of this day to day, hour to hour even. So I say all that to say, try not to look for normal signs of trauma because everybody's going to experience this differently and everyone's going to exhibit signs of trauma very differently. The general idea that we tend to have about someone who's really tearful, really emotional, is honestly shaped by the media. That definitely doesn't mean that there aren't people who manifest and show up in that way, but we have to be really mindful of what the media has told us about what a survivor looks like and acts like, and what is actually the truth, which is that there's a really, really large range of reactions that someone might exhibit having experienced something like this. If you find yourself having those beliefs about how somebody should be behaving, first and foremost, I want to say it's not your fault. You've been taught a certain thing the same way we all have. I would just say take some time to push back against that narrative and to sit down with what you think is being informed by media and what is actually true. At the end of the day, it's just important to know that it's not representative of everyone's experience. Now, if somebody discloses to you that they've experienced SA, first and foremost, the thing you have to say is thank you. Chances are it took a great deal of effort, energy, bravery, and fear in order to share that kind of intimate trauma with somebody. And it probably means that they trust you too. So first of all, congratulations to you, because it means that you have been labeled as a safe person or a potentially safe person by the discloser. The most important thing, if you take away nothing else from this video, the most important thing you can do when you receive a disclosure like this is to just follow the lead of the person who's disclosed to you. Remember that experiencing sexual violence, like all forms of violence, are rooted in power and control. And in this particular instance, it is having control wrested away from you and taking your bodily autonomy away from you. So it's really, really important that we follow the lead of the person who's disclosing, because we can't continue the cycle of making decisions for them or trying to force them in a direction, because that continues to take control away from them. If somebody discloses to you, your instinct might be to try and find out more information, more details, all of that stuff. And I want to first say that is a really, really natural instinct. I actually think it's a deeply human instinct, because it's our way of trying to feel control over something. When my mother had an aneurysm a few years ago, she's totally fine. The first thing I did was become an expert on aneurysm. It's because it made me feel like I had any control, but I had no control over that situation. So it's a very, very deeply human experience. That being said, it is really important to remember that you don't actually have to know the details of this in order to be supportive to someone who's disclosed to you. It's perfectly okay to ask an open-ended question, like, do you want to tell me more? But make sure that they actually get to choose what they want to share with you. It's also perfectly acceptable to ask this person if they want to get medical attention or report to the police. That is a perfectly natural set of questions to ask. The most important thing here, again, is to follow their lead. Please support whatever decision that they make. Particularly when it comes to law enforcement, a lot of people really want to push survivors to report to law enforcement. And it's actually a really deeply beautiful thing to want to seek out justice for this type of injustice. It comes from a place of love. But again, we need to be empowering our people to make their own decisions and have control over their situations. It's also really important to note that the police and the criminal legal system is not always going to be the best route for everybody. When you consider that 98% of perpetrators of sexual assault don't spend a single day in jail, you can understand why somebody might not want to move forward. In the criminal legal system, the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. Unfortunately, a lot of incidents of sexual assault are happening in private places, behind closed doors, with very little physical evidence and very few eyewitnesses, if any. So even when lawyers know that something has happened, it's something that cannot stand up in the court of law. Our criminal legal system simply isn't designed to deliver this specific type of justice. In addition to that, there are a lot of people who are Black, brown, trans, non-binary, undocumented, or from other marginalized communities who might actually experience further trauma by interacting with the police. So we have to remember that there's systemic issues involved here no matter what. At the end of the day, the greatest thing that you can do is affirm the person that has just disclosed to you. Thank them for sharing, tell them that you believe them, and tell them that you're there for them. Remember to promise to keep it private. This was a very deeply personal thing that they've shared with you. So make sure that you aren't going and turning around and sharing it with somebody else. And a simple phrase like, I'm so sorry this happened to you, can go a really long way. It conveys that I believe you and I'm here for you in one single sentence. If you do receive a disclosure, keep in mind a couple of these things to avoid. First and foremost, unless the person has actually explicitly said something, try and avoid assuming the gender or sexual orientation of both the person disclosing to you and or the person who might have perpetrated against them. While, yes, the vast majority of sexual assault is committed by people who are socialized as men, it is not always the case. And it can be accidentally dismissive for somebody to make that assumption. If we have a woman coming to me and sharing that she was assaulted, and I say, oh my gosh, who is he? And she was actually assaulted by a woman, that could actually cause an additional layer of trauma and complicated feelings around having disclosed to me. So just be wary and conscientious of that. Keep in mind that 80% of the time, the perpetrator is known to the victim which means there's a chance that you also know who the perpetrator is. So if that does happen to you, remember to just check yourself and check in with yourself. This is not the moment to question your relationship to this person or what it might mean about you as a person. To the best of your ability, try to just listen and be open and be there for your friend who's disclosing. Now, as obvious as this one might sound, we need to avoid victim blaming questions. There are the obvious ones. What were you wearing? Why were you out so late? Were you drunk? Those types of questions are obviously victim blaming, but there are also questions that can be posed in a way that can feel victim blaming. I don't understand. I thought you left with them voluntarily can accidentally trigger that particular place and make someone feel like it's their fault. And I think the most important thing for us to remember is that we can't ever forget who is actually responsible for the SA, which is the perpetrator. One final thing, try and avoid taking action and taking control over the situation. Again, we have to empower our people to make the decisions for themselves and to make sure that they continue to have control over their situation. So please don't go out of your way to make medical appointments, to go to the police, to set things up without the explicit consent of the person that you're doing this for. To do so, even if it's coming from a place of love, is going to continue to take control away from that person, further disempowering them. At the end of the day, this person simply needs to feel believed and loved, and you can give that to them. Studies have shown that the way the first disclosure goes can actually set the course for the rest of the healing journey. Researchers have found that if the first disclosure of a sexual assault goes poorly, they're not believed, they're belittled, they're dismissed, all of those things, it can take an average of up to 10 years before that person discloses again. So that's 10 years of sitting with that trauma, of belittling yourself, and of not giving yourself those 10 years to heal and process through this trauma. On the flip side, if the disclosure of the first person goes really well, that person is more likely to seek out further help and seek out further support and seek out professional support if that's the right thing for them. Again, all you have to do is love them, believe them, and follow their lead. So what's this got to do with autoerotica? That's a great question because I've just spent 8 minutes depressing the heck out of everybody. Autoerotica, obviously, is just a fun, sexy thing that a lot of us engage in. That's why you're listening to this, I'm assuming. For many, though, it can also be a significant part of their healing journey. For people who've experienced sexual assault, this can be an opportunity to reclaim their sexual identities and their sexual selves. For people who have experienced an aversion to touch or lost a connection to their physical bodies, autoerotica can help them reconnect with their bodies, which can also help them connect with other partners in a consensual manner. Autoerotica can also help us explore things in a safe way, where we're hearing things that could feel a little dangerous or a little dicey in real life, but in the safety of our earbuds, we know that we are always safe. And so we can expose ourselves little by little to things to kind of build up that tolerance and become more connected to ourselves and what we want and what our bodies need. It can also simply introduce us to safe voices because they're all actors, and it can do a great deal of healing to hear from safe men, especially if you were assaulted by one. And of course, we have to read the tags. We can consent into the audios and the audio experiences that we want to have by reading the tags and veering away from the ones that don't do it for us. Autoerotica as a healing tool for people who have experienced this type of violence is actually really powerful and really beautiful. So for all the script writers and the voice actors and all the apps that are out there doing this, know that you are making an impact. I promise you that you are. To my survivors, wherever you are on this journey, please know that I see you, I love you, I believe you, and I will never stop fighting for justice for this issue. To my allies, consider sharing this video, either reposting it on your stories or sharing it with someone that you think might benefit from hearing from this. We can do so much to educate each other about the realities of sexual assault and the aftermath, and we don't have to put that burden on the people who've actually experienced it. And to everyone, please continue to listen to Autoerotica with reckless abandon because it is there for us for enjoyment, for pleasure, and for safety. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Smut Chat with Jeen Bean. So we will catch you next time. And remember, stay smutty, everybody.